The first thing I remember after the anesthesia wore off wasn't the dull throb in my repaired knee, but the nurse handing me my phone with a look of pity. My wife, Eleanor, had initiated a wire transfer for every last cent, over $200,000, from our joint savings while I was under the knife for a torn ACL. A single, chilling text message from her accompanied the bank notification. "This is what I deserve for putting up with you. Don't try to find me." I just stared at the screen, the numbers blurring. 200 grand. My life savings, our future gone. The physical pain in my knee was nothing compared to the sudden, hollow ache in my chest. I felt void, like the structural supports had been kicked out from under me. I managed a week, thanks. To the nurse, my voice raspy. For the next 24 hours, I barely moved, replaying that message. My initial response to her text, hours later when I could form a thought, was a simple, typed question, why? No answer came. The next day, instead of calling Eleanor for a ride home, I called my sister, Sarah. "Need a place to lay low, Sar." Long story. She didn't ask questions, just said, "West room's ready. I'll pick you up." Looking back, the warning signs were there, like hairline cracks in a foundation. Eleanor had become obsessed with self-actualization. Curious over the past year. She started attending expensive weekend seminars, always vague about the details. Then came the secretive phone calls, her laptop snapping shut whenever I entered the room. She'd also grown strangely indifferent to our finances, which she used to scrutinize. "You handle the boring stuff, Mark," she'd said, waving a dismissive hand when I tried to discuss investments. "I'm an architect, meticulous planning is in my DNA." Years ago, after a colleague went through a financially devastating divorce, I'd restructured my architectural firm, Holloway Design Studio, ensuring all business accounts and assets were solely in my name. Clean lines, clear ownership. I'd explained to Eleanor at the time. She hadn't cared. I also maintained a separate, personal emergency fund, my contingency fund, as I labeled it. A habit from designing buildings, you always need a backup. One detail I'd dismissed now screamed at me a few months prior. Eleanor had casually asked about the tax implications if we ever sold the townhouse, an oddly specific question for someone who claimed to find finances boring. I'd chalked it up to seminar chatter. Now it felt like she'd been surveying the escape route. I met Eleanor at a modern art gallery opening. I was a junior architect then. My firm had designed the new wing. She was an art history grad student, captivating with her passionate take on a Rothko. We talked for hours, about lines, form, and the beauty of well-executed design. We married within 2 years, both of us excited to draw up the blueprints for our life together. Our early years were filled with optimism, renovating an old Victorian townhouse in a decent neighborhood. It had good bones, and I poured my soul into its redesign, transforming it into a beautiful, functional home. Our backgrounds were different. I came from a practical middle-class family. My dad was a carpenter, a man who built things with his hands. I valued stability, hard work, the satisfaction of seeing a project through from concept to completion. Eleanor's family was upper, middle class, more concerned with appearances and social connections. She craved experiences, excitement. We built a life, filled our home with art and books, hosted dinner parties. The townhouse renovation was a major event. I handled the structural work, the layouts, the permits. Eleanor took charge of the interior design, her taste impeccable, if expensive. For a while, our different approaches complemented each other. But over 15 years, the distance grew. My firm became successful, but it meant long hours. "You're always at your drafting table, Mark," she'd sigh. "You're more married to your blueprints than to me." She started seeking fulfillment elsewhere, first through yoga retreats, then more esoteric, gurus, and finally, this charismatic life coach, Julian Vance. Our conversations dwindled from shared dreams to her monologues about enlightenment and vibrational alignment. Concepts that felt like flimsy facades to me. The common ground eroded. The ACL tear happened during a charity 5K. Eleanor had pushed me to join, ironically, to reconnect. Instead, it provided the perfect opportunity for her to execute her own destructive plan. At Sarah's, nursing my knee in a shattered sense of reality, I started to piece together the demolition. Eleanor had been unusually insistent about knowing the exact date of my surgery and my expected recovery time. "For planning," she'd said. I dug into my personal email, sifting through old notifications. I found alerts from our joint account showing a series of large withdrawals over the past few months, transferred to JV Consulting. Julian Vance, no doubt. Sarah then casually mentioned she'd seen Eleanor around town several times with a very slick, expensive-looking guy, usually at pricey restaurants. "I thought it was odd you weren't with her," Sarah said, frowning. That evening, scrolling through my cloud photo storage, which Ellie had access to, I found a photo she must have accidentally uploaded her and Julian, champagne flutes raised, a tropical sunset behind them. It was dated 3 months ago, when I was supposedly at a conference, and she was on a spiritual retreat. The image hit me like a wrecking ball. The structural integrity of my marriage hadn't just failed, it was a deliberate, calculated sabotage. I laid it all out for Sarah. She was furious on my behalf, her loyalty a sudden, strong pillar. "Okay, Mark," she said, her voice firm. "This isn't a ruin, it's a site that needs a new design. We'll draft some new plans." Her son, Leo, a bright computer science student, overheard us. "Uncle Mark, if she used shared devices or accounts, I might be able to recover deleted stuff. Digital footprints are harder to erase than you think." His offer was a lifeline. The evidence started to coalesce. Bank statements confirmed systematic transfers to Julian Vance's company. Ellie's credit card statements, linked to the now drained joint account, showed charges for luxury travel and goods I knew nothing about. This wasn't an impulsive act of anger. It was a meticulously planned, phased demolition of our shared life and assets. I realized the fight wouldn't just be about money, it was about reclaiming my life from their fraudulent design. My strategy began to form: gather every piece of evidence, document everything, and then consult a lawyer. The focus had to be the financial fraud, especially the timing with my surgery. The initial shock and despair began to morph. First came a cold, simmering anger, then a surprising clarity. I'm an architect. I solve complex problems. This was just the most personal and painful design challenge I'd ever faced. The grief was there, a dull ache, but a new resolve was solidifying. This wasn't just about what she'd taken, it was about what I wouldn't let her destroy. Sarah recommended Brenda Kincaid, a divorce attorney known for her sharp intellect and tenacity. "She doesn't just file papers, Mark, she builds a case brick by brick," Sarah had said. My first call to Brenda was direct. "Ms. Kincaid, my wife emptied our joint accounts while I was incapacitated due to surgery. I need to understand the load, bearing points of my legal situation." Brenda Kincaid's office was minimalist, efficient. She listened intently as I laid out the timeline, the bank statements, the photo. "The timing of the withdrawal during your surgery is critical, Mr. Holloway," she stated, her gaze unwavering. "That can be argued as financial exploitation of a vulnerable individual. We'll file for divorce immediately, citing fraud and seeking an emergency order to freeze any assets we can trace to her or this Julian Vance." We agreed on the core strategy: expose the fraud, recover what was possible, and protect my separate business assets, which thankfully were already firewalled. A few days later, Leo worked his magic. He managed to access a supposedly deleted archive from Ellie's old cloud account that we'd once shared for family photos. She'd forgotten I still had legacy access. It contained a trove of emails between Eleanor and Julian. They were chilling. Detailed plans to liberate assets, Julian coaching her on how to manipulate me, discussions of my predictable nature, and references to setting up offshore vehicles. One email from Julian stood out. "Once he's under for the surgery and the main transfer clears, we activate phase 2, asset consolidation and relocation." I felt a wave of nausea, then a grim satisfaction. This was their blueprint, their master plan of deceit, now in my hands. The anger was still there, a cold fire, but seeing the evidence, the undeniable proof, also brought a strange sense of power. Hope, even. The emails revealed the true scale of the deception. Julian wasn't just some opportunistic lover, he was a professional con artist. The seminars Ellie attended were likely grooming sessions. Their plan had been in motion for at least a year, perhaps longer. My meticulously renovated townhouse, its value significantly increased through my design work and careful investment, was clearly a primary target in their asset liberation scheme. The realization that this involved such deep, long-term planning, with my home and security as the prize, added a layer of urgency. Brenda moved fast. She filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, gross financial misconduct, and undue influence. Simultaneously, she filed emergency motions to freeze all of Eleanor's known personal bank accounts and any corporate entities traceable to Julian Vance that might hold my funds. The legal machinery was now in motion. It didn't take long for Eleanor to react. A few days after being served, my phone buzzed with a series of panicked calls and texts. "Mark, we need to talk. This is a misunderstanding." I didn't answer. Brenda had been clear, no contact. "Everything goes through me." Julian was likely coaching her on a new script now that their original one was exposed. The preliminary hearing for the asset freeze was tense. Eleanor, looking pale but defiant, sat with a slick, aggressive lawyer. Her counsel tried to paint me as controlling, emotionally distant, and Eleanor as a woman merely seeking financial independence. Then Brenda Kincaid stood up. Calmly, methodically, she presented the evidence of the wire transfer made while I was unconscious, my documented medical state, and the initial bank trails leading to Julian Vance. The judge, a stern-faced woman, listened without interruption, her eyes flicking between Eleanor and me. You could see the under review, sign light up in her mind. Brenda's team worked tirelessly, issuing subpoenas for Julian's financial records and Ellie's communication logs. Then a detail from my architect's memory surfaced. Years ago, we'd opened a joint safe deposit box. I'd cleared out my few valuables after my father passed, but I wondered if Eleanor had ever used it. It was a long shot. Brenda secured a court order. When the bank attendant opened that box, my breath caught. Inside, amongst some of Eleanor's old jewelry, were hard copies of statements for an offshore account in Julian Vance's name, with Eleanor listed as a primary beneficiary. Their contingency plan, their escape hatch, laid bare. The main hearing arrived. I wore a sober suit, feeling like I was presenting a critical design proposal to the toughest client imaginable. Eleanor's lawyer argued passionately that the funds were marital property, equally accessible. Then Brenda played her hand. She presented the recovered emails, highlighting Julian's Pays To directive. She submitted the offshore account statements from the safe deposit box. The judge read key email excerpts aloud. The courtroom was silent. Eleanor's face crumpled. Her lawyer sputtered objections, but the evidence was irrefutable. The judge's ruling was swift and immediate. Comprehensive freeze on all identified assets belonging to Eleanor and linked to Julian Vance. She ordered a full forensic accounting and sternly warned Eleanor's counsel about potential referrals for criminal investigation into Vance, and possibly Eleanor herself for conspiracy. My share of the marital assets, including the house, was looking much more secure. The full investigation, spurred by the court's findings, unraveled Julian Vance's network. He had a history of romancing and defrauding vulnerable individuals. Eleanor, it seemed, was both a willing accomplice and, ultimately, another of his marks. A significant portion of my money was traced to accounts he controlled, now frozen. The divorce was finalized with surprising speed. Faced with overwhelming evidence of fraud and potential criminal charges, Eleanor's fight dissolved. The judge awarded me the townhouse outright, citing my initial investment, the significant value I'd added through my professional work, and Eleanor's egregious financial misconduct. My architectural firm's assets, always separate, were untouched. I received the majority of the recovered funds. Eleanor was left with very little, her reputation in tatters, and the looming possibility of legal repercussions for her role in Vance's schemes. Julian was eventually arrested and faced multiple charges. The design of our marriage was formally, and finally, demolished. I decided to sell the townhouse a few months later. It was a beautiful structure, a testament to my design skills, but it was haunted by too many memories, its foundation tainted. I needed a fresh blueprint. I bought a smaller, modern condo in a vibrant downtown neighborhood, closer to my firm and to Sarah and Leo. It was a clean slate. A life began anew. I poured my energy into Holloway Design Studio, taking on projects that truly resonated with me, more community, focused sustainable architecture. I started sketching for pleasure again, filling notebooks with ideas, not just client revisions. My knee healed, and I took up cycling, exploring the city's pathways. An unexpected benefit: the chronic stress I'd carried for years during the failing marriage had lifted, and with it, a creative block I hadn't even realized was there. My designs became bolder, more innovative. I even won a prestigious local design award. And that disability insurance I'd paid into for years. It covered my lost earnings during recovery, a financial cushion Eleanor had never known about, my own small, well-designed contingency. The experience, though brutal, gave me a new perspective. I volunteered my firm's services to design a new community arts center for a local non-profit, pro bono. Seeing that building rise, knowing it would serve so many, felt more rewarding than any high-paying corporate gig. I also used some of the recovered funds to establish a small scholarship at my alma mater for promising architecture students from underprivileged backgrounds. I named it the Chen Holloway Grant, partly for Leo's critical help and to support his own ongoing studies. It felt good to be building futures, not just buildings. A sense of peace settled in. The anger had long since dissipated, replaced by a quiet resilience. The betrayal was a scar, but scars remind you that you healed. I heard through the grapevine that Eleanor was working a retail job in another state, trying to rebuild. Julian was serving a lengthy prison sentence. I felt no triumph, just a detached acknowledgement of divergent paths. Sometimes, the most devastating demolitions are necessary to clear the ground for something stronger, more authentic. A building's true strength isn't just its initial design, but its ability to withstand storms, to be adapted, or if necessary, to be rebuilt on a better foundation. I learned that the hard way. My new life wasn't the one I'd originally blueprinted, but its lines were cleaner, its structure more honest, and its view, surprisingly, much brighter.